During his speech last night, President Biden weighed in on the protesting going on outside the DNC. He seems to have handed some credibility to those spewing the anti-Israel hate, though. Watch this.
Those protesters out in the street, they have a point. A lot of innocent people are being killed on both sides.
So Biden has said that over and over again. Fox News host Trey Gowdy says that the left's pandering to protesters is a gift to Republicans.
These protests may be the best thing Republicans have going for them. The more imagery you can show of people, go back to October the 7th. Killing women and butchering children, and you want to protest and reward that with a state? Good luck selling that to people in swing states.
In focus now, Mike Huckabee, former Republican governor of Arkansas, and he has run for president. It is great to see you today, Governor. Let's start with the hate on full display and the anger toward Democrats, especially Kamala Harris, over Israel.
It's really hard to get your arms around the fact that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have done more to try to maybe massage this issue. And they've even said, as Joe Biden did last night, oh, these protesters have a point. What is that point? The point is that Hamas came across the Israeli border and they massacred, slaughtered viciously little babies, violently raped women in front of their families, and slaughtered over 1,200 people that were innocent civilians. What is the point? And the fact that a lot of people in Gaza have died is largely because Hamas hides all of their own weaponry among their innocent civilians. So this is something that could have been over from the beginning if Hamas had surrendered. It could be over today if Hamas would surrender, but they don't. And Joe Biden's ridiculous statement that they have a point, obviously Joe didn't have a point there.
Well, it seems like they don't really know what to do with the people outside. And there's some collision of ideas on how much they matter politically. Doug Schoen, who you know was part of the Clinton administration, not administration, but advisory inside the White House, was on with me yesterday and said they don't need that number of voters who are outside protesting. They can win without them. That's what he says about Democrats. So they're doing some calculus of how to deal with them. Meanwhile, they have signs that say, to kill their own candidate. You'd think that they could speak up against that, but they don't. All right, let's get to this. President Biden took off very fast last night after he spoke. Just 12 hours ago, he hadn't even started yet. He was about to speak 12 hours ago at the DNC, and now he's 2 time zones away. And when he was in Chicago, Biden told reporters over and over, there's no bad blood over the push for him to drop out of the race for re-election.
Donald Trump claims that you were pushed out, put from the top of the ticket, and this amounts to a coup from your party. What do you make of those claims?
Stability is still present. It's been the honor of my lifetime to serve as your president. I love the job, but I love my country more. I love my country more. And all this talk about how I'm angry at all those people who said I should step down, that's not true.
Well, this is true. They delayed him over and over last night as they changed the schedule and added speakers at the DNC. Biden finally took the stage, and editorial columnists are writing this. Dems buried him at 11:30 p.m. in a final disgrace. Politico Playbook called it the late, late show and referred to Biden as a midnight cowboy. The New York Post cover with past his bedtime. Biden appeared emotional at times, and he stood in front of the Democratic Party basically cheering for the end of his political career, decades as a congressman, senator, vice president, and president. And more headlines now. Poor, unwanted Joe Biden. Biden basks in the applause from Democrats who dethroned him. Well, in that cheering audience, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Remember, she reportedly was instrumental in getting President Biden to quit the ticket. And she didn't exactly shy from rubbing salt in the wound.
Yeah, I believe that.
It does seem like there's some residual bad blood or resentment, and I'm wondering if you've spoken to him and what your response is to that.
Sometimes you just have to take a punch for the children.
Have you talked to him?
I have
Is my only
to do what I have to do.
Right.
He made the decision for the country. My concern was not about the president, it was about his campaign.
Okay, I had not ever heard that. Was that like a knock at somehow people suffering with domestic abuse? Sometimes you have to take a punch for the children? Nancy Pelosi there. Jerry Baker writes in his new column, the ruthless dispatch of the former president was less Brutus and Cassius and more Jack Kevorkian. Not a hail of knives in the back, but a soft word in the ear, a gentle squeeze on the syringe. Whew. All right, Governor, I come back to you. Not any of this is subtle. Not the way he was treated and not the reaction to it.
Yeah, it's kind of sad. I mean, this is from the side of the aisle that are his friends. These are the people that supposedly love him that are saying these very horrible things. And the ones that put him on the program long after his bedtime. Quite frankly, I think a lot of America was asleep when he spoke because they wanted to make sure Joe was also somehow asleep. But he did yell his speech out for 48 long minutes. It seemed more like 48 hours. And it was one that just was kind of sad to watch this swan song, more of a head dive into a pool without water.
You know, it reminded me of something that a Democrat told me on the set yesterday, Brad Howard, who's one of the surrogates for this campaign. These are shiny objects, and it means that they don't have to talk about the things that they don't want to talk about. And that would be the protesters, the anti-Kamala Harris crowd out there, the pro-Hamas crowd out there. They don't have to talk about that. They can focus on other things, like the balloons that celebrate abortion and birth control outside, the mobile van that's giving free abortions and vasectomies here. They can talk about Joe Biden's big moment, and they don't have to focus on Kamala Harris's policy. Your last quick word.
Well, I think it's interesting. The Democrats don't believe in walls unless those walls are built to protect them. So you have all these protesters, very few arrested, and I wonder, are they a threat to democracy? Are they going to be chased down in their homes a year from now with SWAT teams from the FBI? And will the Department of Justice go after them like they did the people who were at the Capitol on January 6th? I wait to see.
Governor Huckabee, always great to have you in focus. Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Compagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.